So good morning. Hi, good morning, everybody. So I'm going to start the workshop today, how to write an article. So for those who don't know me, my name is Sami Gomez. I'm from Tunisia. I'm currently working in Qatar, in HMC. I used also to work in Switzerland. I'm still a member of research group there. So I would like to know each one of you first. You can start.
My name is Emma Katia. I'm a first year resident in psychiatry. Here in Tunisia, in Brazil.
Okay, great.
محمد موسى psychoanalyst
Yeah, okay.
Here in Tunisia?
Tunisia.
Hi, I'm Tejo. I'm a third year resident or registrar in psychiatry from South Africa.
Welcome.
I'm Rabib Nibli. I'm a doctor. I just finished my MD.
Good. Rabbi.
My name is Mohammed Hassan.
Future is okay. And yeah. Sir, hi.
Mohammed Hassan. I'm a psychiatrist from Nigeria.
Welcome.
I'm Camille Noël. I'm a psychiatrist from Belgium. So I work in a unit of crisis and psychiatric emergencies at Saint-Luc University Hospital, Brussels, and also in a children inpatient unit in Channel Psychiatric Hospital near Brussels.
Good. So welcome to you all. Okay, so I don't know if any one of you already has an article published, or none of you. Has any one of you tried to write an article yet, or not yet? Has any one of you wrote a poster? I guess yeah, most of you. Okay, so we'll first start by the basics, of course, and we'll try to go look into one article, a few articles that some of you wrote, okay? And then we'll try just to go through the common mistakes that are often done. So the objective of this workshop is actually to guide you through the how to write an article. So because we won't talk about the content as such, but the writing style. The writing style is very, very, very important, okay? You know that for an article to be accepted, the first criterion is actually the quality of the writing. If it's not well written, you have absolutely you stand no chance of your article being accepted, okay? So they will first look at your writing style, and then they will look at your content. If your writing is bad, they will say, yeah, this is a very amateur guy, and we won't accept such an article in our journal. Don't forget that the editors are always trying to find the best articles for their journals. They have the impact factor. It means that they just want their, every single publication they accept into the journal to be cited. If it's not cited enough, okay, then they are not willing to really accept the publication, okay, of the article. So for it to be cited, of course, it has to meet certain standards, and we're going to talk about the formatting, the writing style, okay? So, first of all, so you know what are the different parts of an article? You all read an article, I'm sure, so you probably know what are the main parts of any article. There are different parts, okay? Introduction, okay. Sometimes they also call it background. So there's introduction or background, okay? What else?
Objective?
Okay, objective.
A.
Write everything you say and then we will see. I think the mic is not very good, but we'll just do it. Objective, yeah? Okay.
Your aim.
Aim, okay.
Is that the same?
We'll talk about that.
Method. Method.
Okay, method. Or methods. Okay. So methodology is actually the science that studies methods. So this is a common mistake again. Don't put methodology here, put methods or method, okay, but not methodology. So this is one common problem. I think probably with French speaking doctors, maybe. Okay? So even in French they no longer use methodology, they are now using more method. Because I mean if you're strict with the meaning of the word, methodology or methodology just means the science that studies the methods. Okay? So okay, what else? Results, okay. What else?
Discussion.
Come on. Discussion, yeah. What else? I know it's Sunday morning, but I need you to be awake. Conclusion? Limitations, okay. Limitations. Conclusions. Okay, what else?
Directions for future research.
Okay. Thanks for future research. What else? Okay. References. Okay.
Disclosure.
Disclosure.
Acknowledgement.
Acknowledgement. Yeah. What else? Okay, we'll stop here because these are the most important parts here. So first part, most important, one of the most important parts, introduction or background. Okay, this is a very important part that exists in every single article and in every single abstract even. Don't forget that an article can also contains an abstract, always. Okay? So introduction, background, that's always there. Second, objective aim. Okay, what's the difference between objective and aim? Do you know? Yeah.
So objective. So I think the aim is more broad, and objectives are specifically within the aim.
Okay. Who else has another idea? Yeah.
The objective is more general. The objective of the study, for example, is to see if that treatment is efficient for that disease. And the aim is to see the correlation between the
Okay, so it's, for you it's the opposite.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're right. So the objective is generally used as a more broad term. So sometimes they are used interchangeably, sometimes they don't really make any clear difference. Other times there's generally one objective and sometimes many aims. But well, the aims are more precise, But well, for this workshop we won't go into these details. So we'll just, because in many cases they are just interchangeable, used interchangeably. Okay. So the objective, are they, a different part, separate part of the paper, or like they are included in another part? What do you think? So when they're in general in posters, because we need something visual, okay? The objective is generally a part, separate part, okay? However, in articles, in 99% of the cases, the objectives are actually part of the introduction. They are the last part of the introduction, okay? So generally, this is like one prime. So it's generally included in the introduction in most articles, okay? Okay, second, we have methods. This is a big part, second part, okay? Third big part, results. Fourth, discussion. Limitations. So limitations in general, they included also in discussion, okay? So they are the last part of each discussion. But even better than limitations, you can just say strengths and limitations. So because we don't only talk about bad things, we are also talking about good things here in your study. Okay? Don't forget that you want to sell your article. You have of course to focus on the limitations and to say what limitations there are in your article, but it's also very important to put your strengths, okay, to sell your article a little bit as well. Okay, and then 5, conclusions. Everything that's related to future research is usually part of the conclusion as well. Okay, so references is the 6th spot. Okay, disclosure, acknowledgements, sometimes ethical considerations as well. Okay, so do you all know what we would write in disclosure? Disclosure is like conflicts of interest. Okay, there must be a section for conflicts of interest in every single manuscript. Okay. However, where to put it, this depends on the journal itself. Some journals will tell you to put it just after the title, others will tell you to put it after the abstract, others will tell you to put it at the end of the article, before the references, after the references. So you just follow. I mean, for every journal, you will have like author guidelines, and you just follow them. Okay? So we are going to talk about the, let's say, what's common between all journals. Okay? Acknowledgements, what's the difference between acknowledgements and disclosure? What do we put in acknowledgements?
Thanks to people who have helped us.
Exactly, so we thank people, we can thank people who helped us through the study. So these are people who actually had certain participation in the study, but the participation is deemed not enough to make them co-authors. Okay, it's not strong enough to make them co-authors. Okay, ethical considerations. This is also, I mean, this has to be put somewhere. They often ask for even the reference number of the ethical approval you got from which ethical committee of your hospital, university. So they often ask for that. These parts, all of these parts are actually compulsory, but their position in the article will depend on the journal itself. Okay? Let's start with the introduction. What do you think we put in the introduction? Okay, I think let's be more practical and let's go start reading some of the articles, or I actually received from some people here. Okay, so I don't know if it's big enough for you, or I will increase. Okay, is it large enough for you? Okay, are you able to read, all of you? Okay, we'll start with this introduction. I will just read. So first, I forgot something important, which is the title. Okay, all forgot about the title. Okay, here, let's go talk about the title afterwards, okay? Let's start with the introduction. Okay, if you read this introduction, what does it say? The regulation of emotions is a psychological process. So the title is Transcultural Validation of the Regulation of Emotions Questionnaire 2. So this is the name of the questionnaire among Tunisians university students. Okay, there are some problems with English, but I won't be talking about English problems here. But no problem. So the regulation of emotions is a psychological process including the capacity of inhibiting, initiating, maintaining, or modulating emotions to create a coherent psychological functioning and to enable the individual to live in adequacy with his or her environment. Are you following? Okay? The aim of the study was to conduct a cross-cultural validation of the regulation of emotions questionnaire, REQ2, in Tunisian university students, and to explore correlations between emotion regulation strategies and social, demographic, and clinical variables. Okay? Since ever, man was questioning about emotions and its impact on daily life. William James, the well-famous psychologist, even wrote a whole book, there's a mistake here, but about it, entitled What's an Emotion? Emotion has specific characteristics. It appears after one's judgment. Okay. Then the emotion is either positive or negative regarding the situation. it is facilitating or inhibiting someone's goal. Emotion tracks with the other components of the individual, its behavior and neurophysiological effects. Emotion is to be distinguished from feeling, sensation, and mood. Emotion leads to an action in opposite to the feeling. Emotion can be both positive or negative, not stress. Think mood lasts more in time and is really dependent on a particular situation as opposed to the emotion. And the modal emotion concept describes the regulation loop as emotion leads to action that leads to a new situation, which makes another emotion emerge, and so on. Okay, we'll just stop here. So because it's longer than that, but we will just read the end. So different questionnaires were proposed to evaluate emotion regulation. Just actually rank 2, try to explore the different dimensions of the emotion regulation strategies. And then, okay, this scale could be used to detect and specify emotional disorders and guide how to deal with as in third wave CBT. There is no validated tool it is treated with emotion regulation, and then the aims of the study were 2, 1, 2, 3. Okay. So, do you have any? What are the problems you see with this introduction, for instance? So we're going to talk about the structure of the introduction. So first of all, the introduction here starts by something very general, the regulation of emotions. So in fact, it's a study about validating, transcultural validation of the scale of regulation of emotions, okay? So first of all, the first paragraph here, so what are the problems within this first paragraph? What are the problems that you can see?
It's quite a long sentence, perhaps.
Okay, a long sentence. This is very typical for people from French-speaking background. English, in fact, in French, people speak a lot. Sentences are extremely long. It's more of it's a bit literary language. It's not really. Whereas in English, especially in scientific papers, you will always find sentences to be very, very, very short, very, very simple. Okay, don't use any any sentences which are more than 2 lines maximum, really maximum. And then, so don't use any complex sentences. In any article you read in English, you'll find that it's very concise. So the language has to be very, very concise, very simple. Sentences are very short. This is throughout the manuscript. Okay, this is the first thing. Very important is pay attention to the language throughout. Okay. The style. It's not literature here. So very concise. If you can say something in 1 word, don't say it in 2 words. Never. It has to be simple, no complex sentences, okay? Very short. The only native English speaker here just got it straight away. There's a problem with such paragraphs, okay? Okay, no problem. But other than that, what are the other issues with such a paragraph? So these are issues that I think that are common to every single beginner here. That's why I was expecting. I asked for certain manuscripts, but I know that because the same mistakes exist in all of our articles and manuscripts. So the regulation of emotions is a psychological process, including like a definition of regulation of emotions. Okay, what's the problem with that?
No reference?
She said
No
no.
reference, exactly. So you should not write a single sentence without a reference, unless you're in the results part, or unless you are going to express in the discussions part, in the conclusion part, something really from your study or something really, like your own opinion. In the introduction, there's no way you can write your own opinion, okay? At the beginning, like that, every definition must have a reference. You cannot put a definition without reference. From where did you get this definition, okay? Is it good to start by defining the subject you are going to talk about? What do you write in the introduction? What do you think we write in the introduction? So the last part of introduction is like here. It's well done. This person put the aims at the end of the introduction, which is the right way to do. However, the first part of the introduction, what shall we do?
What are we doing this study for, and what the context actually does?
Okay, the context of the study. Why are we doing this study to start with? Yeah. So I think the best thing to remember, the most important thing to remember for the introduction is you have to answer one question. Why do I have to read your article? Okay? Why do you want me to read this article to start with? You have to sell it. To make me think that it's important. Okay? So here, you have to only put things that help you answer this question. Okay, so here we can start by definition for the regulation of emotions. It's okay. But in other papers, for instance, if you write a paper about, let's say, the metabolic syndrome in schizophrenia, please don't start by defining schizophrenia. Because everyone knows what schizophrenia is. If someone doesn't know what schizophrenia is, you shouldn't be writing your article to start with. When you're not writing a newspaper article for the general population, you're writing an article for people who are normally expert in the field, So they should have some knowledge about. So don't start by saying, schizophrenia is a chronic psychotic disorder. Everyone knows that, And is it important? Does it help answer this question if I'm talking about metabolic syndrome in people with schizophrenia? Does it help? No, However, if you say, for instance, that schizophrenia, so you can directly start by, for example, speaking about mortality in schizophrenia. Why is talking about metabolic syndrome important in schizophrenia? You have to show, for instance, in the introduction that people with schizophrenia have a higher mortality rate, that their life expectancy is shortened, and that this life expectancy is shorter not only because of suicide or psychiatry-related issues, but mainly because of cardiovascular events. And cardiovascular events, we all know that metabolic syndrome is a risk factor for cardiovascular events. And we also know that people who are diagnosed with schizophrenia receive antipsychotics, and we know there's a link between antipsychotics and metabolic syndrome. So you see, you show why this is important, why you are talking about metabolic syndrome in people with schizophrenia, why it's important. It's important because it's associated with cardiovascular events, it's associated with high mortality. So this is, the big part, the large part of the increased mortality in people with schizophrenia is actually due to cardiovascular events. And you just put references for these things, Don't start because, often they will just start by defining, schizophrenia is a chronic psychotic disorder occurring in 1%, because they think, this is an introduction. Introduction is actually meant to introduce the subject. Introduction is not meant to introduce. In a scientific paper, introduction is not like introduction in a newspaper article. The aim is why this article is important. Don't lose this. So here, the regulation of emotions, it's a little bit more complex than schizophrenia. So defining it at the beginning of the introduction, yeah, can be debated, but it's okay actually, it's acceptable, okay? Okay, but we need the reference. So this is very important. Then here, the second paragraph, so the author directly talks about the aim, started talking about the aim of the study. What do you think? And then they repeated the same thing at the end. They are talking about the aim again. So this is of course wrong. We only talk about the aim of the study where?
At the end of the
At the end of the introduction. Okay, so here, because you see, so this is the part that should be removed from here altogether. Okay? Then, okay, here, so men were asking themselves about emotions, their impact on daily life, etc. So this shows the importance of emotions. Okay, but what's the topic actually? The topic is validating a scale about regulation of emotions. So it's a little bit too far-fetched here. We're talking about what are emotions. It's quite far from our study. Otherwise, just imagine if you have, any study in psychiatry about schizophrenia, for instance, and in every single article, whether you talk about schizophrenia and metabolic syndrome, whether you talk about risperidone in schizophrenia, or sexual disorders in schizophrenia, or comorbidity, schizophrenia, and substance use disorders, you will always talk about schizophrenia is a psychotic disorder, it's common, it's disabling, it's defined by the DSM-5 as, of course, you will not talk about broad subjects here. You just focus on the exact subject you have. Here we are just validating a scale, not about emotions, but about emotion regulation. We don't need to speak about emotions or to define emotions or to show the importance of emotions. Maybe we can say that we can talk about emotion regulation. This is very different. We can define emotion regulation. So here, the author here defined emotion regulation, okay, even though there was no reference. But then after that, what should have been done, is actually not to talk about emotion and the characteristics of emotions. This is really very far from the topic, quite far. But we could have talked about the importance of the regulation of emotions in clinical practice, okay? For instance, problems with emotion regulation, for instance, have been described or found in patients with borderline personality disorder, bipolar disorder. So in your clinical practice, why is it important? As a practitioner, as a psychiatrist, why will I use a scale for emotion regulation? Why? Because we know that many disorders in psychiatry are associated with problems of emotional regulation. For instance, this could have been a much better introduction. Okay? Are you following me? Is it clear? Okay, so here, so this whole part actually, emotions play a fundamental role. I think this is okay. Here, emotion regulation. Okay, we're back to the topic somehow. Is defined by three major characteristics. Okay, by the individual, by the environment, to modify the emotions that the will to modify the emotions that emerge, starting of process that will lead to change. So here are the characteristics that define emotion regulation, which is okay, fine here. There's some problem with the language, with the English language here. Okay, so this is okay. Characteristics of emotion regulation at the very start of the introduction, we can put this, but directly, normally, the paragraph just after we talk about why is emotion regulation important in psychiatry, to start with, okay? And then, so, in fact, back to our topic is to validate a scale, and for emotion regulation, why did we choose that scale in particular? So we have to say, for instance, there are many scales were developed for emotion regulation, and the most used scales are X, Y, and Z. And for instance, this scale Rec 2 was developed by whom, when, and what are its characteristics? We want to know. I mean, for instance, it has, I don't know, 10 items, 12 items, it's short, it has already been validated in several languages, I don't know, in French, in Spanish, in Chinese, but not yet validated in Arabic. It was validated in other cultures, I don't know, in the Eastern Asian culture, in, I don't know, the European culture, but not in North African or Middle Eastern cultures. Okay, so we have to talk about this. This scale, why did you choose this scale? And then, why are you trying to validate this scale? Is it a problem of language or culture? I think both. So you have to translate it, but also to validate it culturally. And why? You can also say that, other scales, I mean, scales in general are culture specific, sometimes are culture sensitive, and the scale is not, I mean, that's valid in the US, is not always valid in Tunisia or in India, okay? And sometimes we have just to modify it a little bit to adapt it to the culture, okay? So this should have been the introduction here. And then I just go to the end. Okay, here different questionnaires. So this is good to evaluate or propose to evaluate emotional regulation, and Reg 2 trying to explore the different dimensions of the emotional regulation strategy. So this is a good part. Okay, and there's a reference there. The questionnaire has good psychometric criteria. Okay, even though good here is too broad as a term, don't use any judgmental terms in a scientific paper. No surprises, no good, no bad, nothing. Okay? So you have to be very, very, very obsessive, very, very, very objective. Don't put surprisingly, and we found that, or unfortunately, sometimes you read, unfortunately, there was no response to the treatment. There's no unfortunately. It's very, there are no feelings in a scientific article. Okay? You have to be computer. So the questionnaire, which was initially developed for adolescents, is composed of 19 items, okay, for dimensions. So they cannot be, for the rest of the questionnaire, functional, dysfunctional, internal, external. Okay, this is good. So you have to talk a little bit about the psychometric properties of the questionnaire, of the original questionnaire, about its advantages, its drawbacks. It certainly has advantages. Here, the author talks about, explore the different dimensions. You can say this is, I don't know if this is true, that this is the only questionnaire that actually explores the 4 dimensions. Maybe others are exploring the emotional regulation as a whole, or they are missing on one of the dimensions. Maybe there are other scales that are more comprehensive, but they are too long to administer. This is more practical. This is more commonly used. So you have to put these things, okay? And then, so this scale was used to detect and specify emotion disorders and then how to deal. Okay, this is not bad here. So the English language, there are some problems with the English language, but here, so this is not bad because this is talking about the practicality of the thing. So this scale can be used for therapeutic purposes. So don't forget what's the aim or what's the advantage of anything in medicine. It should have either diagnostic value, prognostic value, therapeutic value. Okay, here she says that it has some diagnostic value, okay, because it explores many different dimensions. It also has therapeutic value because it can be used in CBD, for instance, or other types of psychotherapy. But here there is no reference, and you have to be very specific. You can say, we have to find an article here that talks about using this scale for psychotherapy purposes. And you can easily find that, I think. Okay? So here the aims of the study, and so let's finish with the first part of the introduction. So far we talked about the importance of the language to be very concise, very simple, no complex sentences at all. Sentences should be very short. Okay? Second thing is the introduction. So there are, let's say, 2 large parts in the introduction. The first part should answer one single question. Why do I have to read this article as a reader? Okay? You have to answer this question. You have to convince me to read your article. Okay? Second part, objectives of aims. Okay? Okay. In general, they should be connected somehow, of course. I mean, these are two different parts, but there must be some certain link. For instance, here you can start talking about emotional regulation, about different scales used for, I mean, the importance of emotional regulation in psychiatry, the importance to measure the emotional regulation, then about the different methods used to measure the emotional regulation, different scales, about this scale, so you go from the more general thing to the more specific thing, and then you would, for instance, after that, talk about the, for example, the validation of the scale in other different cultures, whether, I don't know if there's any other scale that's close to this scale that has been validated in Tunisia or any nearby country, similar country in Morocco, in Nigeria, I don't know, in Libya, okay? And then if, after that, you can just say, so in the absence, for instance, of any scale for emotional regulation that's validated in our social cultural context or something of that kind, we, okay, aim to etc. etc. Okay? So here the aims, so adapt and validate the regulator direct too. So something else very important here. What do you think the regulation of emotion questionnaire 2? It was used many times in 4 letters. So each time you are, I mean, every time you are using, for example, scales or even some, I mean, you have to use acronyms as well. So, okay, so we are going to talk, I'm going to talk about this just after the aims part, so acronyms. Okay, so the info do you think here? Adapt to validate the Rec 2 in Tunisian university students. In order to do that, 1, translate the regulation of the Rec 2 in Tunisian dialectic language, and to verify its validity in Tunisian university students, then check the validity of construct and the reliability of the Rec 2 questionnaire in a population of university students. What do you think? Any comments? I need you to be awake. Is it well written? Not very well written? Could have been better or not? What do you think, Camille?
It should be better.
It should be better. Could have been better. Can improve it a little bit. Okay, how? Do you have any idea? Camille or anyone else?
Full sentences.
Okay, full sentences, okay. That's right.
So perhaps it could be stated like separately. So to translate the regulation and emotion question first, and then secondly to verify its validity. So you make it quite clear that it's different.
Okay, this is also possible, yeah, to put like 2 bullet points. Okay, the most important thing in any scientific article is to be very, 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 very clear. The clearer you are, the better it is, okay? So here it's not very clear. There's some redundancy. There are a lot of redundancy here.
Second part of the first sentence and the second sentence are almost the same.
So this is quite confusing. I mean, you don't really answer. You have to be very concise, very clear. It's not very clear. So you can say, for example, okay, as DGL said, first, I mean, translate to Tunisian Arabic or something like that, direct to, and then second, for example, to check the validity, the psychometric properties, the reliability of this translation. Okay. These can be put as separate things. Okay, but in other, let's say in other types of articles, because it's a bit special about validated scale, but in other articles, how do we write aims? So the aims should be also quite specific and quite smart. It's possible. So do you know what are SMART objectives?
Specific,
Okay,
measurable,
SMART. Specific. For instance, if you are going to, as I said, let's go back to the same example, talk about the metabolic syndrome in schizophrenia, to be very specific. You cannot say, I want to examine metabolic syndrome in patients with schizophrenia. You have to be very specific. You have to say it in also, in a measurable way. So if for instance you just want to see, I don't know, to see or to examine the prevalence of metabolic syndrome in drug-naive patients with schizophrenia, you should specify very specific and say it's only in drug-naive patients with schizophrenia. Because sometimes what I often see is that in the introduction we are very general, and then suddenly in the methods we say, no, exclude anyone who has received any antipsychotic. So it should be very clear from the objectives that your objective, so it's a very different objective. For instance, metabolic syndrome in patients with schizophrenia and metabolic syndrome in drug-naive patients with schizophrenia. It's totally different. So you have to be very specific. Okay, M is for
measurable.
measurable. Okay, don't tell me I am going to examine the metabolic syndrome in schizophrenia. How? You have to be very, it's not measurable, the metabolic syndrome as such. You have to say the prevalence of metabolic syndrome, the incidence of metabolic syndrome, okay? I don't know, the mean HbA1c levels, I want to determine the mean HbA1c levels, etc. So they have to be something measurable. Don't say, for instance, I want to examine whether diabetes in patients with schizophrenia is well controlled or not. This is too broad. You have to be it should be directly measurable. You have to say, so you can say that, but then between brackets you say diabetes or well controlled diabetes being defined as HbA1c less than 6.5% or something. Very measurable, okay?
When you say measurable, it means it will be discussed in the results.
Yeah, exactly. So measurable means you will put it in the results as a result, as a main finding. So in general, objectives are sometimes classified into main and secondary. And the main objective is actually your main outcome of the study. So for example, the prevalence of metabolic syndrome in patients with schizophrenia. So this is the prevalence of is actually a figure, it's a mathematical figure. Or the mean age of
Because, for example, for metabolic syndrome or diabetes, it's measurable variable.
Yeah.
If it is a scale like this, how do we make it measurable?
Here for scales, we'll not talk about the exact properties of the scale, but for every study like this one, there are certain statistical parameters actually for every single, for internal, external validity, etc. that you have to measure. Okay? So you have to put these, you have to measure these. Okay? Okay, so specific, measurable, what else?
Achievable.
Achievable. And for instance, it's possible, it's achievable. Okay? Realistic. Okay, R, what's R?
Relevant.
Relevant, yeah. Of course, should not be irrelevant. And then T is very important. Time bound. Okay? For example, we are going to assess the efficacy of drug A, new antidepressant, on symptoms of depression as measured by Hamilton scores by week 4, by week 8. Okay? So it's time bound, it's very specific. It's not efficacy in general, because an antidepressant can have efficacy on anxiety symptoms, on depressive symptoms, on impulsive symptoms, on obsessive symptoms, on I don't know what. So you have to be so we are going to assess the efficacy on depressive symptoms, how they are measured using this particular scale, And then time bound. I mean, does it have an efficacy within 1 week, 4 weeks, 8 weeks? It has to be defined, of course, from the objectives. Okay, you have to know that.
And achievable.
And achievable, of
Like
course, yeah.
not 100,000 people.
Yeah, don't put, for example, that week 2040. Yeah.
So if it's a cross-sectional study, how would you word the time?
Okay, if it's a cross-sectional study, how can it be time bound? In fact, when it's cross-sectional, so you have only one measure. So time bound won't be very relevant here. Okay, but yeah, you can just say I'm going to measure the prevalence, etc. of this. Cross-sectional studies, you usually examine prevalences.
Okay.
Yeah, so, but I mean, not all of these items are always relevant for your objectives, but if they are relevant, they must be there. Okay? Okay, so this is for the aims. So, is it okay for you? So far, from the introduction, 2 parts. Okay, let's move to the 2 things here, title and acronym, before going to the methods. Okay? Title. Here, let's go back to the title. Don't forget that we all have the cognitive bias of primacy. It means that we are heavily influenced by the very first impression we have about anything. So you actually start judging the book by its title. They always tell you don't judge the book by its title, but we actually do. So here, transcultural validation of the regulation of emotions, questionnaire 2 among Tunisian university students. What do you think of this title? Too long, okay.
It's not very attractive.
Not very attractive, okay. Okay, I just write here. Too long. Not very attractive, okay. Yeah, what else?
I think the first one, transcribe the culture, is not it's not relevant to the aims of the
Okay, so transcultural, I think it's not relevant to the aims. Okay. Okay, what else? Any other comments, opinions?
Students are in university.
Students are in the university.
So among
Sometimes they are
Tunisian
in
students.
school.
Yeah, or you can remove your university. Among Tunisian university. Among Tunisian, students.
Tunisian university students.
No, it's not university. You remove university.
Tunisian students, there might be also the word students in English may mean school. Your student at school, your student high school. So it's not like in French, étudiant. No, it's student, élève, étudiant. So student, it's university student, yeah, it's okay, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering if we can make it a little more catchy.
Catchier, yeah.
Yeah, catchier if we put the main topic at the beginning, like for instance,
Yeah.
emotional regulation questionnaire 2.
Colon, yeah.
Yeah, transcultural validation among Tunisian universities.
This is a possibility, yeah. This is totally a possibility because again here the emphasis is always, I mean, even in language, that the emphatic sentence, so the most important word is the word that you begin with. So it's, yeah, so you could, yeah, I think it would be better to start, as can be said, with regulation of emotions questionnaire to then, colon, transcultural validation, etc. Okay, this is possible. Okay, what else?
No dot at the end. I think there was no dot at the end.
There was no dot at the end. Normally there's no dot at the end of the title, yeah. Okay, too long, in fact, it depends, because it shouldn't be extremely long, okay, but it also should have the the length that's required for it to be very specific and very clear. So it's, after all, it's not a title of a literature book, it's a title of a scientific article. You can be, it can be fairly long, as long as the length is needed for, clarity purposes, okay? Okay, not very attractive, this is a big boss, this is a cherry on the cake. If you have an attractive article, an attractive title, then yeah, you have more chances to get accepted as well. Okay, here honestly, it's difficult to make this title very attractive because the study itself is like about the validation of the scale. So it's useful, but not so catchy. I don't think we can make it catchy. Okay? Relevant to the aims is very important. So don't put, sometimes the titles are too broad, Sometimes, as I told you, if you are talking about the prevalence of metabolic syndrome and the lifetime prevalence of metabolic syndrome in drug-naive or patients with schizophrenia, don't put a title like schizophrenia and metabolic syndrome. Okay? This is too broad, it means nothing. Or schizophrenia and smoking. Whereas you are actually trying to see, for example, the prevalence of smoking in the population of patients or any patients sometimes with schizophrenia. Okay? So it has to be very specific, very relevant. Okay? So for especially for interventional studies, there's also another acronym you can use. It's called PICO. So if you really don't know how to put or what are the items that must be present in the title for interventional studies, so there must be these items must be present. PICO, P for population or participants. Okay, here we have the participants. Okay, they're there. I is for intervention. So here in the intervention is actually the scale itself, maybe. Okay, controls. Here we don't have controls. For this type of study. Okay, and the outcome. So, especially for interventional studies, these four parts, PICO, must be present in a title. Okay? So you have to have controls and to put them clearly. Who are the controls in the title? What's the main outcome of the study? And it should be written in a specific manner. Okay? And what's the exact intervention and what's the population or who are the participants? Okay? Okay, let's move on to the other bullet point I put here, acronyms. What do you know about the use of acronyms in scientific articles? Even from reading the articles, I guess you have certainly an idea about how they use acronyms. Those who had a thesis should know as well.
When you use more than 3,000 words in the application, you can use the acronym.
Okay, more than production. There's no real rule, but if you use the word often or quite often, or if the word, especially if the word is very important for the study, like here, the regulation of emotions questionnaire is clearly a very important term that you will use quite often in the study. So, yeah.
No acronym and titles.
No acronyms and titles. This is true. This is a rule. Okay.
If you have a lot of acronyms, you have to put it in a different section at the end of the.
Okay. If you have a lot of acronyms, you have to put them in a different section at the end. In scientific articles, not really. In thesis or in dissertations, not generally. In scientific articles, in general, because they are quite short, after all. So it depends, but in most cases, you have not put a list of acronyms. But it's easy. The first time you have to, use the full term, then you announce the acronym first, and then you are forbidden to use the full term again throughout the article. Okay? Here you see that she used or he used here rec2, regulation of emotion and regulation. So it was well defined here. So now we know what is rec2 here. Then back here we see, throughout the manuscript sometimes, the author just uses again. So here, for example, the regulation of emotions questionnaire 2 again, and again defining it again. So it's very wrong. You should define it only once, and once it's defined, you are forbidden to use the full term again. If you, simple mistake as this one, as simple as this one, can just make the editor understand that you're a very beginner, novice, and he will just tell you, okay, try hard, try again. He just will reject. He will not even read the whole article. Okay? So, because it's a very beginner thing. So you have to be, and how to define the acronym. So the acronym, for example, here, you should never write, for example, rec2. Some people actually do this, rec2, and then they open, and then say regulation of emotions. Questionnaire, this is wrong. Okay? As I told you, you have to be very, 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 very obsessive in any scientific writing. So this is wrong. And this also shows that you are very novice in the matter. Okay, you have always to write the full term, and then between brackets the acronym. This is how to define it. Okay? Is it clear? Okay. Let's move to the methods part right now. So the methods part is actually, the problem with it is that that's very different depending on the nature of the study itself. So okay, here. So what do you put in the methods part?
Population.
So
Type
here.
of the study. The type of the study.
Type of the study, okay. What else? Type, yes.
Population.
Population, yes.
The number of patients included.
Okay, number of patients.
How did you include
The tools.
the inclusion criteria?
Yeah, inclusion criteria. What else?
How did you do
The choose.
How did you?
how did you recruit the patients?
Recruitment, okay.
How and where.
Okay. What else?
The duration of the study.
Duration of time.
Duration, okay.
The tools that you use.
Tools, this is very important. Okay, I should have used another, sorry, here. Okay. Okay, tools.
If you're using for example, if you're talking about diabetes, you put the population of the diabetes you use. If it's not the aim of the study, you should announce.
Okay, certain definitions. Okay. Sorry, here, definitions. Okay. Yeah, what else? The last part, okay.
What is written under inclusion?
Duration. Okay, now but we are going to analyze this more in depth. Okay, this is just like a draft here. What else? So you said statistical analysis, okay? Okay, stats here. Okay. We are going to talk about these things. Okay, so in general, the last part would be the statistical analysis. Okay? This is in general the last part of the methods.
And you put the ethic part, the last of the ethic part.
Ethics part. Okay, so the ethical part can also be put as a part of the methods. Often it is, not always, but it's often done. You can put it at the end, at the very end, after the. So it depends. You can put it, it depends on the journal actually. Sometimes it's put just before the statistical analysis. Sometimes it's even put just after the populations, the participants, right, I mean, quite at the beginning of the methods. So, I mean, for every article, in fact, if you are willing to submit an article to a certain journal, you will always have to adapt your article. So what we generally do is that we write a certain manuscript using a certain target. I mean, we target a certain journal, okay, in mind. We read a few articles from that journal that have been recently published, because you know the author guidelines change. So, for example, you just look at the last issue of the journal. You took one article that's quite similar to yours. For example, if you have an RCT, you just pick an RCT. If it's just, for example, like here, validation of a scale, you try to find an article about validating the scale in that same journal, okay, as recent as possible, and then you will know where to put. I mean, how they want you to put the ethical, etc. So, because these are things that can be variable from one journal or to the other. And then, if you get rejected by the journal, you will always have to adapt your manuscript before submitting it again. It should be fairly easy, because most of the things are common. There are just a few things that are different. So sometimes it's just to move a paragraph from here to there. Otherwise, every journal publishes very clear author guidelines, very obsessive ones. They will tell you even what font to use, what's the size of the font. I mean, what's the distance between the lines? They will really specify every single thing. Okay? There are various rules, formatting rules as well. Anyway, so the ethical consideration is often than not included in the methods. Okay, there should be some sort of a sentence. Sometimes also the funding is included in the methods, but sometimes you put it in the methods, then you put it again in another chapter called ethical considerations. Sometimes you put it twice, funding as well. Sometimes you put it twice. Okay, so this is important. Okay, here so stats. Okay, statistical analysis. It's generally the last part. The first part is actually generally the type of the study. So we are going to talk about the population here, how this population was chosen, etc. Inclusion, exclusion criteria, and also part actually of the population part or population of participants. Okay, you have to define exactly the tools, and for every single tool, for example, if you use the PANS scale, the PANS score, for example, you have to say something at least about the psychometric properties of that scale you use, especially if it's an important scale. So you can say that we assess psychotic, positive, negative psychotic symptoms using that scale. Okay, we for example use the mania scale, etc., to assess patients for mania or manic symptoms. And you use this cutoff, and you always put the references. If there's a cutoff, sometimes a single scale can have different cutoffs. So you have to choose one cutoff to say why, okay? And you always have to put a reference for the scale used. So you have to define it, to say, for example, it's a 21 item scale that's widely used to assess depression or depressive symptoms, for example. And you have to explain why you chose that scale. For example, if you are trying to assess depression and anxiety in patients in a medical department, for example, in a medical unit, people often use the HAD scale, for example. So you can't just say, yeah, the HAD scale has been commonly used in patients with medical conditions, because actually one of his properties is that it does not account for somatic symptoms of depression. It focuses on symptoms of depression and anxiety that are not overlapping with symptoms of medical conditions. They don't focus on fatigue, on, for example, pain, on things that can be, in fact, overlapping with a medical condition. Okay, whereas other scales might put more focus on pain, on somatic symptoms, on loss of appetite. You know, if you are, for instance, assessing people with cancer, they all have a loss of appetite. So you have to choose the scale accordingly. Okay, and to say why, and to put references. Okay, interventions as well must be put, and you have to define the interventions very clearly. So, population must be defined very clearly with inclusion and exclusion criteria. Here again, for French-speaking people, in France there are also the non-inclusion criteria. So, for example, in our faculty here at Tunis, they insist that non-inclusion criteria are different from exclusion criteria, but in any article that you want to publish, if you put non-inclusion criteria, they will tell you what the heck is that? Do you know what have you ever heard about non-inclusion criteria? It's a very French thing, so don't put it in the article. They just call it exclusion criteria. They make things simpler. So non-inclusion criteria in English is something that does not exist. Okay? Exclusion criteria. What else? Number of patients. This is very important. Do we put this in results or in methods? Number of patients. Right. So, for those who say methods, raise your hands. We put number of patients in methods. We put it in results.
Results.
Okay, so it depends. In most of the cases, so it depends whether, look, the introduction and the methods part are supposedly written before you start the study. So if you actually chose the number of participants, you chose it before starting the study, it must be in the methods part. But in that case, you have to specify why you chose that number. So there must be something of sample size calculation there. So the sample size calculation must be there in the methods part. Now, if the number was random, you just used like convenience sampling and then said, I will take all patients, I will include all patients that fit certain criteria and who presented to, for example, with, I don't know, certain symptom at a certain hospital or out-clinic patient, outpatient clinic, sorry, and then the number is actually a result. It's no longer, it's not included, can't be included in the methods. For most studies that are done here in Tunisia, the number will be put in the results actually, but we rarely do a sample size calculation. The sampling is usually done by convenience sampling. You just take 50 patients from your department or the unit or whatsoever, or all admitted patients at psychiatry, EF department during a certain period of time. This is convenience sampling. You cannot know before starting the study what's the number of patients. So it must be put in results in that case. Yeah.
If you do a sampling calculus, do you put it in the when you define the population, or do you put it in the statistical part in the end?
Yeah, good question. So the idea where to put the sample size calculation and the population part or in the statistical methods part. Actually, you can do both, but most often they put it in the population part, most commonly. But you can put it there. I mean, it has to be there somewhere at least. Okay? Sometimes, I mean, it's different chapter by its own sample size calculation just after the population. Okay? So the intervention, if there's any intervention, it should also be very clearly defined. If there are any labs, you have to be also to what are the exact values and what are the norms that you are using. The normal range should be there, okay? Even the method, sometimes if the main outcome is actually a biological value, you even have to specify how it was measured. But, I mean, the biochemical technique itself must be there. Well, if it's just like a covariate, it's not that important. If your main aim is to see, for example, I don't know, the adherence to treatment in patients with bipolar disorder, and you just use, I don't know, lithium levels as the covariate, well, they're less important than if you just wanted to see the link between lithium levels and, I don't know, the outcome, the relapses or something like that. So if the lithium levels are really important in your study, you have to tell us how did you measure them exactly, the biochemical method itself. You have to see with the labs what the level they are using exactly, okay? And even sometimes the machine, because you know the results are variable from machine to machine. You can find different values, okay? So is it clear for this part, for the methods part? Okay, we'll just take a look here. So this is a cross-sectional questionnaire aiming to validate direct to. We choose to work with the university student population coming from the low faculty, okay, the certain university, and the private engineer school, okay, from certain, there's the duration here is there, the time frame is there. Okay, what do you think of this first paragraph? Okay, this was, so methods and results never use the present tense. It's totally forbidden to use the present tense. Unless you haven't started the study yet. If you are just submitting a proposal, you can say this is, or this will be, or we will do, because it will be in the future. You haven't started but here, the study was done. If you were publishing a paper about it, that means that it was done. It must be in the past tense, okay? Never put the present tense here in the methods or in the results part. Okay? So this was a cross-sectional. So not a questionnaire. Questionnaire is a tool. It's not. It's not a study. It's not a type of study. So it was a cross-sectional study. Okay. Aiming to validate. Okay. So the aim was already defined before. I'm not obliged to repeat that here. Okay, we choose again present tense, we have to use the past tense everywhere throughout the methods and the results parts. Okay, and here so the problem here also is that why do you choose to work with these? This is the problem here, because they're telling, okay, you're talking about transcultural validation, so you are trying to extrapolate and to say that your findings are actually applicable to the general population in Tunisia. Is that true? Are these students representative of the Tunisian population? Are they really similar to the, because I think that the questionnaire will be used in clinical practice. So among patients with mental illness. So the patients with mental illness share anything with these guys from the university. So this is more of a methodological problem here, but you have to choose the sample very wisely. And the population very wisely. Why are you taking people from? Unless you are willing to do a study afterwards on university students, for example. This is more logical to say, okay, these university students are possibly similar to any university students in Tunisia. Okay, this can be argued. However, I think, if you're trying to use this afterwards on patients with mental illness, so their age is different, their social cultural background is different. These guys understand French and English, probably. They don't, many patients in the psychiatric hospital won't understand the word from French or English, so their cultural background might be very different. Okay, these are from urban places. Most of the patients are from rural or semi-urban settings, so they may have very different culture. Okay, and even the language itself can be very different. There's no such a thing as the Tunisian dialect. There are Tunisian dialects with an S at the end. Also, and sometimes one word can have different meanings as well. So all of these things have to keep them in mind. Okay, So this was a cross-section. We first adapted to Arabic, and then we conducted the validation study on 384 students. Here you have to say why 384. How did you come up with this number? If this is a number that you did not choose, then it should be in results. It should not be in methods in general. Okay. And then here, okay, we use the depression, anxiety, and stress scale, the DAS 21, and questionnaire, etc. Here, for example, you also have to define the DAS 21. It has to be defined. Why do you use that? For which purpose? What are the psychometric properties of this scale? Okay, at least one paragraph for like 2-3 sentences for that. Don't use any scale unless you define it. You say which version you used for it. Why do you use that scale? What are the main properties of that scale? Is it the self-questionnaire? Is it rater-administered questionnaire? Is it the questionnaire of 20 items, 90 items? Okay, did you use the Arabic version, the English version, the Spanish version? Yeah.
I'm just wondering if you kind of developed your own questionnaire based on a literature review, how would you explain that?
So the question is, if you develop your own questionnaire based on a literature review, it's very difficult to develop your own questionnaire, in fact. But in that case, you must have a reference questionnaire. Like, for instance, if you want to develop your own questionnaire about, the REC2, for instance, you have to use another questionnaire as well. So to have both questionnaires administered to people, and it's like you have a reference. In medicine in general, you need this. If you find out, for example, if you try to investigate the quality of or the properties of a new imaging study, what will be new imaging technique? What will you do? You have to, perform this new technique, and then also to perform the gold standard, the previous gold standard technique to all patients, and to show that there's a very high correlation, and that you are actually measuring the same things. But your new technique might be less costly. Your new technique might have better properties. Okay, yeah.
So, like for my study, for example, I use for burnout a questionnaire that was validated, the instrument, the Maslow burnout inventory, but then as part of the questionnaire, I added on questions for demographics.
Okay.
And then the third part of the questionnaire was for contributing factors specific to our circuit.
Okay, so you added certain questions to the existing questionnaire. So in fact, yeah, it's possible. You had a questionnaire, to measure certain things. Okay, and then we almost always add questions. For example, you want to, you almost always add questions for social demographics, for instance. So this is totally okay because it's very objective. You don't need to validate the scale to say, gender or age. This is very objective. Also, it depends on your questions. If your questions are very objective, for example, I don't know, have you ever been admitted to hospital? This is clear. There's clear cut. But if you are trying to assess a more subjective thing, a more complex thing, then you should always, if you, for example, try to assess compliance to or adherence to medication, you cannot just, use your own questions, because it's very complex phenomenon. You can just say, have you been adherent to your medication? The answer to that is not generally yes or no. So people are more or less adherent. So there are questionnaires actually for that. And you must use the questionnaire. If you're just adding questions for very simple, objective things, then you just can add them. Have you had any, are your parents alive? This is clear. Okay. But how do you rate your relationship with your parents? This is a much more complex thing. It has many dimensions. And so here, if it's an important thing in your study, it must be assessed through a questionnaire. You cannot ask questions. You can of course build your own questionnaire. It's a bit complex as a process, and you must always have a reference. Okay. So, of course, inclusion criteria here, so you're talking about non-inclusion criteria again here in English, we don't have those yet, sorry. Yes, yes.
About using scales, does it say that you're an amateur if you put a scale and it's not validated for example, in Arabic, and you say, I use the French version and I translate it or in English and I translate it. Is it seen as a...
Yeah, sure. So the question was if I use a scale, for example, the scale does not exist in Arabic, and I just use the French or the English version, and then I translated it by myself and I used it. There's clearly a problem with that. They will tell you, and this is not a validated scale. You must validate the translation first.
if I announce it in the methods as a... I announce it. I say it's not validated, but it's relevant to my work, so I...
But they will tell you, okay, good work, but you have to validate it first. There's a step missing here. It's unlikely that it will be accepted unless it's, I mean, if your target has very low quality tool.
I'm sorry if you have sales already, but how do we validate it?
So,
Make it validated.
okay, it's not the purpose of this workshop, it's a very long process, but to validate, there are different techniques or possibilities, but in general, if you want to validate a translation, you can just use, I mean, for example, in general, most scales are in English, so you have to translate them, for example, into Arabic, for instance. So you have to translate them first into Arabic. Then generally there's a back translation, so someone else who hasn't seen the article, the scale in English, has to just read the Arabic version, and then to translate it back into English, and then you will see what are the differences, and there must be, I mean, a few people who will actually see what are the exact differences and why. Sometimes the words are a bit different, and they have to agree on the differences, okay? And then afterwards, I mean, you can do many things. For instance, the easiest thing is to find people who understand both Arabic and English, and then you administer both the questionnaires in Arabic and English to the same population, and you say, I mean, there's a very high correlation. Then you can actually measure the psychometric properties, and this solves the problem. But often, I mean, people it's very hard to find bilingual people sometimes, and then you have to, in that case, use, for example, you can use another scale which is already available in Arabic, for instance, to assess the same thing, more or less, and to say that there is a high correlation. There are different techniques depending on what you have. The easiest thing is to find bilingual people, actually, and who can speak both languages. It's not always obvious. Okay, let's move to the results part, I think. Here, maybe I will just use another, just to change a little bit. We have a poster here. We'll just use it. So it's much shorter, of course, because it's a poster. Poster is almost like an abstract, you know. So you have all the different categories, but they are much shorter. Of course, so 2 sentences for introduction, background, in general. So something like that. So here it's a poster. So we will just deal with it as if it was an abstract. Okay. So here the introduction says verbal hallucinations. So I don't know if there's no title, no problem. Verbal hallucinations are experienced by a considerable proportion of the general population, and their highest prevalence is among adolescents and children. And then the aim of this paper is to find out psychotherapeutic approaches helping to work with the patients on their hallucinatory experience. Okay, what do you think of the introduction and objectives so far?
There is no reference in the introduction.
Okay.
They said a fact, the author said it as it's a fact.
Exactly, so okay. But look, in the abstracts, we don't put references in general, in most of the cases, but in posters we do. So yeah, there should have been some sort of reference, but maybe in posters sometimes it's acceptable to put references just at the end. All of them is possible sometimes. But yeah, it would have been better to include a reference here. Okay, what else?
The present tense.
The present tense. Okay. Okay. In general, in introduction, we often use the present perfect a lot. So because these are things that happened in the past, they are still happening. So it has been, for example, I don't know, high cortisol levels have been associated with depression because they were associated and they are still associated. So it's like present perfect tense. Okay. So verbal hallucinations. And okay, like I said, here the problem is there are terms that are very broad. They are not really considerable. What's a considerable proportion of the general population? You need figures. You have to be concise, clear, and very accurate here. This is scientific paper. Okay, considerable amount. This means absolutely nothing of the general population, okay, and their highest prevalence. What kind of highest prevalence is that? Is it 2%? 2% might be a considerable proportion. 80% is also a considerable proportion, okay? So the aim of this paper was, and not is, again, to find out, okay, this aim also is, this objective is very general, to find out psychotherapeutic approaches. How? Okay, I mean, what kind of psychotherapeutic approaches exactly? This is quite broad as as an objective, too broad. Because so far I don't know exactly what the article is going to talk about. I don't have any clear idea. I don't have. It's about auditory verbal hallucinations, psychotherapy. I mean, what's the clear objective? This is a very general objective. Should be smart, it's not smart. Methods, okay, lines of approach to work with the patient on their hallucinatory experience are provided through a literature review on verbal hallucinations. Okay, what do you think of this? Anyone?
It should include the words of the literature research.
Exactly. So here it's like a literature review. For any literature review, I mean, back to the basics, you have to be very specific, very precise. You have to put what exactly, how did you do this literature review? Which search engine did you use? Which databases did you use? Which words or search for terms did you use? Okay?
Which period? And which period?
Which period exactly? Which filters did you use? Did you search for all articles, only articles in English, only articles in English and French, maybe because you speak these languages? Maybe you just ignored any article prior to 1995 or 2005, I don't know, okay? Maybe you only looked into the reviews. You have to filter, to put which filter to use. And even the date on which the search was made. Why? Because it should be replicated. It should be you should be able to replicate your findings. Okay? If you tell me, yeah, I did the search on December, I don't know, today, okay, December 15th, 2019, I have to be, I mean, for example, I will not tell you afterwards, why didn't you include this particular article? If this article was published after, so yeah, just okay with that, okay? Okay, for results, and here, I mean, the passive form is used. What do you think of using the passive forms here? Sentence is passive. Are provided through, or were provided. Sometimes in the methods they will say, for example, a cross-sectional study was performed versus we carried out a cross-sectional study. Which one would you choose?
We don't say we.
Okay, we don't say we. In fact, we can. But the passive sentences are also very commonly used in this context. But we can say we, no problem. And you can say we carried out. It's also possible and acceptable. Okay. Results, okay, for example, here, this review shows first that among adolescents and children, hallucinations are, again, past tense, were transient. Okay, here again, results should be really very specific. Results are like something very mathematical. Don't use considerable, high number, large number, I don't know what. Give me the number, give me the percentage. And the results, I mean, you must have a certain result that really comes out clearly. The results must have the same outline as the objectives. In fact, you have to keep the same outline throughout your article. The outline is somehow dictated by your objectives. Then you have a primary objective, secondary objective, and the results should in general follow the same. And results, I mean, what do we use for results at the beginning of each the part? I mean, are there any different parts of the results? First part is generally the general characteristics of your sample. Okay, for most articles, you will almost always find in the results. So general characteristics, social demographic characteristics. Okay. So the first thing, so for results here, so one is general. Okay. Something very important here for results, use tables. Okay? You have to use tables. And you have to use so don't try too much in a scientific article in the results part. You only write down the most important findings, and all the findings should be in a table, 2 tables, 3 tables. Okay, tables are the most important thing in the results. Sometimes figures, but please don't put figures. I mean, too many figures. The figures have to be really, linked to your main objective, okay, or to secondary objectives. And for example, don't use the pie charts. Never in a scientific article, okay? Never use these. If you want to use a figure, it must be something like a regression plot, something that really, if you see that thing, you just understand the main results of the study. So when it's possible, whenever it's possible, just put figures and tables. And for, let's say, beginner studies, tables are much more likely to be, let's say, useful more than figures, because figures are mostly for more advanced statistical things. But tables, you can just put one table and put all the general characteristics, and generally you can put the mean, the standard deviation, so you can put these things in the results, okay? Okay, is that the time is really, don't have much time, so I'm just trying to be quick, but there are so many things about results, tables, how to write the tables, but in the most important thing is that to start with the general characteristics and then just follow your objectives. Okay, so the second part is actually objective 2, 1 here, the third part is objective 2. So you have to, for example, here, if I have a study about, I don't know, the efficacy of certain drug A on patients with depression, the main objective might have been the efficacy at week 4, okay, on depressive symptoms as measured by a certain scale. Objective 2 might be, for example, the tolerability of the drug. Objective 3 might have been anxiety symptoms, efficacy on anxiety symptoms. Objective 4 might be something like active or efficacy on suicide. I don't know, okay? So here the first part would be something like, okay, I don't know, 30 patients received this drug, 30 patients received the placebo, and then you just, put put a table with the mean age, the gender, social demographic characteristics, the mean Hamilton scores in each of the groups, for example, the mean anxiety scores in each of the groups, the mean, I don't know, suicidal rate scale, whatever scale you use, etc. You use maybe a scale for tolerability. You also put it there, you put the means, and you just compare. So you can put just the means there, just to have an idea about, for example, the severity of the depression characteristics of the sample. If you had patients with severe depression who are mostly suicidal, with psychotic features, without psychotic features. Okay? Second part would be really the main outcome in your study, and then you just follow with the other secondary objectives. Okay? This is really what we put in results. Okay? Okay, I just go to the discussion part. Okay, so conclusion directly. Sometimes, so in posters, sometimes you just put conclusion directly, you don't go through discussion. This is possible. In abstracts, it's often the case. We don't put discussion in abstracts in general. We put results and straight conclusions. In certain journals, you don't even put conclusions because conclusions are considered as the last part of the discussion sometimes. So sometimes you don't see any conclusion, but actually the conclusion is there. It's just the last part of the discussion. So okay, we're going to talk about discussion. So lengthwise, I think we are always underestimating the importance of the introduction part. The introduction part actually has most of the literature review. So if you are going to talk about any subject, then you have to put most of the information about literature review. So it will be in the introduction part actually. The introduction part should be quite important. For example, in scientific article should be 2 pages. Sometimes, I mean, as long as the discussion part. Sometimes you see that its introduction part is very short. This should not be the case. It's not really an introduction. It's called introduction, but it's in fact also a literature review. It's a very important part of your paper. Okay. So what are the different parts of the discussion here? What do you think? What's the first part of the discussion?
Detailed summary of the results.
Exactly. This is very important and it should not be missed.
Yes.
The first part is a summary. It's very brief, brief, of the main results. This is a very important part that's always missing. Okay? In discussion, first, you start by saying, in this cross-sectional study, we found that 35% of patients with schizophrenia fulfilled criteria, the criteria for metabolic syndrome, okay? And I don't know, for example, 12% had diabetes mellitus. So we have to put the main results here to summarize them in one paragraph, 5, 6 lines, okay? Something like that. Then there's the biggest part of the discussion. At the end of the discussion, what should we put here? Okay, strengths and limitations, huh? So you can start by limitations and then put strengths or vice versa, as you wish. But you also have, I mean, don't just put limitations, you have also to defend yourself, or, for example, you have to discuss the limitations a little bit. Don't say, okay, for example, in your, let's take in one of this, for example, here, I don't know here, but it's not very good example because it's like a review, so it's a bit different, very specific. For example, let's say that you, okay, let's go back to the metabolic syndrome in patients with schizophrenia, and your study was only, I mean, you only recruited patients who were admitted to the hospital. You obviously know that these patients are not representative of the whole population of patients with schizophrenia. So you have to put that as a limitation. But you can say, for example, that these findings cannot be generalized to patients with schizophrenia as a whole because they might be very different from patients who are admitted or have been admitted to psychiatrists. Quite different. Most severe cases are generally admitted, not all of them. But you always have to find why, and to say, for example, we wanted to focus on inpatients, for instance, because I don't know, we know that they have the highest mortality, or for example, we did not do this because it was very costly, we did not include this, etc., because it was less practical. So you have to find some sort of an explanation most of the times. Okay, for example, I don't know, you want to assess cortisol levels in patients with depression, and you had only one cortisol measure. You can say, okay, multiple cortisol measures would have been better, of course. But anyway, for example, most other studies also had the same limitation and also, had only one measure of cortisol levels, for instance. So this makes the limitation a little bit more acceptable. So in fact, the limitation, was also present in previous studies after all. Or you can say, okay, but for example, given the sample size, I included 2,000 patients, so I had to do one cortisol measure, so otherwise it would have been much more expensive, for instance. So you have to find something, okay? Okay, and sometimes you just put the conclusion here either as part of the discussion or as a simple point. Okay, what do we put here?
Discuss on
Okay, discuss our results. How?
Maybe you can compare your findings to what has been found in past.
Okay, so compare your own findings to what was already found or published. Compare findings. Compared to previous. Okay, this is true. Yeah. What else? The problem sometimes with the discussion, the most common problem is that we only find this. Compare. They will tell you, okay, in our study, we found that drug A was not effective in treating depression. In Ahmed's study in 2015, they found it to be effective, whereas in another study published in 2018, they found it to be effective. Okay, so it should not be purely descriptive. Any other questions here? Yes?
Can include the reasons behind what you think.
Exactly. So the reasons behind the discrepancy, reasons. You have to find an explanation, reasons behind the differences and similarities, okay? You have to explain why. Why are your findings different from theirs? Okay? Find an explanation. Why are their findings different? You'll almost always find different findings. Sometimes you'll find that some studies will find drug A to be effective, others will find it to be ineffective, others will have more nuanced findings, like it's effective in a subcategory of populations. So you have to clearly specify why. To find an explanation, a reason why. For example, in our study, we found a higher prevalence of metabolic syndrome than in most other studies. However, there are many explanations why. Maybe the metabolic syndrome is more prevalent in Tunisia than in Europe. So if you have this, for example, you can find an article that says, okay, the prevalence in the general population in Tunisia is such, and it's higher than you have a meta-analysis from Europe that says that the prevalence is such, and then you have to say, well, the general population here has a higher prevalence of metabolic syndrome. This is one possible explanation. Another possible explanation is that we use maybe too many, for example, many antipsychotics. There's antipsychotic polypharmacy. Maybe we are using certain antipsychotics that are more associated with metabolic syndrome than in other settings. Maybe we are using olanzapine too much, for instance. We are underusing other antipsychotics which are much less associated with metabolic syndrome. So you have to find some explanation for this, okay? Don't just compare in a descriptive manner. You say, okay, our prevalence here was higher than the one in Kenya, and then the one in Nigeria, and then the one in France, and then the one in Japan. Okay, but why is it higher than all of these? Okay?
You can also put hypotheses or interpretations of our own results.
Exactly, it's very good. So we have to put like a hypothesis or some sort of hypothetical explanation for our results. Why did we find these results? It can be also like a pathophysiological explanation as well. We can say, for example, I don't know, we found an association between this and this. For example, we found an association between, let's say, it's not very, for example, between the female gender, for instance, and the presence of metabolic syndrome in patients with schizophrenia. You have to find an explanation, maybe, I don't know, because, for instance, people with, the mean age of onset of schizophrenia in females is higher, and then the prevalence of metabolic syndrome increases with age. So you can find something like epidemiological, let's say, explanation, but you can also find pathophysiological explanation. This is wrong, but you can just say, okay, we found an association with the male gender, because, I don't know, androgens have been associated with, for example, metabolic syndrome, and, for example, androgens can enhance the effect of, or increase the effect of olanzapine, of antipsychotics on insulin resistance, or maybe, I don't know, we can find certain explanation that's also pathophysiological, okay? But this also has to be put here in discussion. Anyway, describe and discuss means find reasons why, okay? In general, you won't have a clear answer, but just write your hypothesis or your hypotheses in plural, because in general there might be different explanations that are possible. Okay? So this is the main part actually of the discussion. Then we come to strengths and limitations. As I told you, put limitations, explain them, also put your strengths. Okay, this was the first study in the MENA region, for instance, about this. Okay? So that way it's it's an important study, the first in the region, for instance. It's the first published, for example, all of the previous studies about this topic were cross-sectional, and this is the first longitudinal study. So this is a huge strength of your study, okay? Can just put your strengths as well as your limitations. Okay, what do you put in conclusion? What do you think we can put in conclusion?
The main result.
Okay, the main results again.
Or the main outcome.
The main outcome again. Do you think so?
Perspectives.
So here, look, in discussion, you will put the results in a mathematical manner. You will put figures again. The most important figures are. You can, for example, if the main outcome is prevalence, then you have to put the figure again in the discussion, okay? Here, it's a very general conclusion. Usually, you don't put figures in conclusion, okay? It should be very short. The conclusion is just one paragraph in general. It's short. It's not as long as the other parts. Introduction is long. Methods, results, discussion. So all of these are pretty lengthy. But the conclusion is usually one paragraph, sometimes 3-4 lines. That's enough. And you often, just as one of you said, talk about the future studies, maybe, okay? But what's the main conclusion of your study? This is the main thing. That's the main conclusion. If you want to, what did you add to the literature with this study? Okay, what did you do? In one sentence, what did you find? For example, I don't know. Metabolic syndrome is the prevalence of metabolic syndrome is very high among patients with schizophrenia, but we all actually found that it's very high in the subpopulation, etc. So then you say, okay, probably we have, for example, in order to screen for metabolic syndrome, we can target certain subpopulations. So there's a practical thing to it. So you have what's the practical thing that you can draw from your study? Okay.
To respond to the aims.
Recommendation.
To respond to the aims of
Exactly. So you have to have. This is very important. You must have answered the aims. Okay. If you have not answered the aims, then there is a huge problem with the way you wrote the article. Okay. Okay. So I think it's almost time. Do you have any questions? Is it clear? If you don't have anything, nothing at all. It's actually very short, of course, but yeah. Yes.
Around how many pages the standard article should have?
Good question. So how many pages? Okay, it depends on the type of the article and on the journal. In general, I mean, if you exclude the references, the tables, and the figures, they almost always exclude those from the page count and from the word count. Almost every single journal will tell you, okay, if it's original research, it should not exceed 5,000 words, 3,000, 10,000, depending on the journal. Okay, so you will have some sort of limit that's set by the journal. But in general, so I think that most articles for beginners should be like 2 pages, around 1 page and a half for introduction to 2 pages, around 1 page and a half to 2 pages of methods. For fun, 2 pages, roughly 2 pages for each of the main. So it would be like 10, 12 pages in total, excluding the abstract, excluding the references, excluding the tables and the figures. It would be like around, in general, that's the average. However, it heavily depends on the journal, it heavily depends on the type of article you're going to write. The case report, for example, can be extremely short. If it's an original study, then it's 10 to 12. But there's a tip here, because you know that the shorter your article, the higher your chance to be accepted, to get it accepted. Why? Because they won't waste 20 pages of their journal on an average article. But if the article is very short, it's only 3 pages. Of course, 3 pages, I'm not talking about A4 pages here. I'm talking about the journal pages. For 10 pages here, we have something like 3 pages or 4 pages. So if it's shorter, but not extremely short, yeah, you enhance your chance. Okay? They can accept something average they can give you 2 pages, but they won't accept to give you 5 pages. That's why sometimes if your article is average, they will tell you, okay, thank you for your submission, but please resubmit it as a letter to the editor or resubmit it as a short article. Sometimes they have different formats in the journals. There's the original research article, the standard version. Then you have, for example, like short versions or even letters to the editor. So generally they fit into 1 page of the journal, and they tell you, okay, we submit it as a letter to the editor. Basically, it means that they can accept it if you really trim it down and make it very short. Okay? Yes?
Any tips on writing case reports?
Okay, case reports, tips on writing case reports. First of all, they must have an educational value. If they don't have any educational value, even if it's a very rare condition, etc., but there's no educational value, don't try to publish it. Okay. Second of all, now case reports are becoming harder and harder to be accepted into journals because all journal editors are worried about their impact factors. And impact factors are calculated based on the number of citations every article, in fact, receives. And we all know that case reports are unlikely to be cited, at least likely to be cited among all article types. So it's your struggle, right? Where to publish a case. It used to be much easier before. 10, 20 years ago, it was used to be much, much, much easier. Now there's not a single good journal that accepts any case reports. So you have to go, to try to submit to, low quality journals, but that's totally okay. You have to start somewhere, and I think to start, a case report is a very good start. You won't reach the tip of the mountain if you don't start climbing little by little. There must be a first step. So, how to accept? So, the case journal, the shorter it is, okay, the more compact it is, the higher the likelihood of it to be accepted. If it's written into the format of a letter to the editor, so just go to check any journal that accepts case reports. How to find a journal that accepts case reports? Just do a PubMed search and just find case reports and then find on which journals they were published and recent ones. Because in 1975, the American Journal of Psychiatry used to accept case reports. But it's not the case any longer, of course. Okay, so that's how you find some sort of journal that accept case reports and trying to submit them as a letter to the editor. Letter to the editor is basically a very short, concise one. Case report. Letter to the editor is actually one type of article that's very short. It's like a letter. It's not. I don't know why they call it letter to the editor. Basically, maybe historically it was like a letter. They still sometimes write to the editor, but actually it's an article. It's like a long abstract. An abstract is generally 150, 200 words. A letter to the editor will be something like 500 words with one figure only or one table only if needed. For example, to show the progress or the course of illness, you can use one figure, and that's all. But be short and concise. Also, you have to get the patient's permission and signature. You always have to get some sort of because they often will ask you for that. And of course, the patient should never be recognizable. Don't put any social demographic data that are not relevant. Because sometimes I find Mr. T.Y. Why are you putting his initials or her initials? Why? Or 23 married with 9 children. Okay, why are you saying that? If it's not relevant to the case, don't say it. Okay? Or living in La Marsa. Come on. Because you can recognize this patient, in fact. Admitted to psychiatry B, I don't know what. Okay, so if I'm the neighbor of this patient, I can know, okay, she's 45, she has 5 children. Okay, she's working as, I don't know. So you just say, she's working as a housemaid. She's working as a housemaid in La Marsa, and she lives in, I don't know, in suburbs somewhere in Tunis. So of course, no. You don't put the job if it's not relevant. You don't put the marital status if it's not relevant. You don't put anything that's not relevant. Okay? That's it. But please do something. Another tip. If you find something that's between two, specialties like something that's for example, between neurology and psychiatry, try to submit it to a neurology journal instead, because it might seem to be more original, more rarer, more of interest. Well, neurology is very close to psychiatry, but if you find something, for example, linked to genetic condition, for instance. So in genetics, they won't have many cases from psychiatry, so they want to have some sort of diversity. They're likely to accept yours. If you, for example, endocrine, they don't hear much about psychiatry. Radiology, as well. So you see other specialties.
Does it apply to general medicine, for example, if there's an overlap between, for example, the comorbidity of a psychiatric disorder and another disease in the general population? Is that preferable to publish in a psychiatry review or?
I think in a general medical review it might be better. Because it depends on the target group you have, and here, maybe your case is not that interesting for psychiatrists. It might be more interesting to GP, for instance. It looks more original, let's say, for them. So yeah, general medicine is often better, but it depends. It has to be also, I mean, something linked to their practice. If you're going to talk about a very, I don't know, a very specific thing in schizophrenia, they don't need to know anything about this. But if you are going to talk about, for example, hypertension and
The
depression,
prevalence, for example.
things like that, yeah, for example, hypertension, depression, things that they see every day, that's, yeah, or you can always publish in other journals.
We have time for another question.
Yeah, okay, next question.
How to choose the journal you're gonna send?
Okay, how to choose the journal you can send to? Oh, many things you can. I mean, you have to, with experience, you will know which quality of journals you can actually expect. I mean, you will be able to assess the quality of your article and of your study. You know that this study is poor, but I have to publish it somewhere, so I will try to find a journal that's modest, or this study is really very good and I can really try to submit it to very good journals or to better journals. In general, try to find similar studies and see where they were published. And another tip here, oh, okay, don't forget that the editor just wants to increase his impact factor. Look at your references here. If you see many references from the same journal, then please submit to that journal. If it's not overrated, I mean, if it's not very or much better than your article value. Why? Because if your article is published, then you will get citations from those previous articles, and their impact factor improves. So they will be willing to actually choose, I mean, to publish your article because they see citations from their own journal. Okay, so this is another tip you can do. But look at, I mean, go to the journal's website, take a look at the impact factor. In general, if your study is so-so, which is generally the case for beginners, don't try anything above 1. If you try any impact factor above 1, then your study should be really good. It's difficult to find, I mean, unless it's very original. Sometimes the methodologies, the methods are not extremely good, but the idea is extremely original, or this is something very specific to our culture, then yes, you can target something like an impact factor of 1 or 2. Or if it's really one of the best studies here done in Tunisia, for instance, yeah, you can target 2, 3. You should, if it's well written. But if it's, yeah, I mean, if it's convenient sampling, I mean, it just shows random people from a random department that don't try more than 1, they will never accept it. It's a waste of time. In general, you have to aim a little bit higher, okay, because sometimes they can accept it, and then you just decrease the impact factor, try to don't imagine that you're going to be accepted the first time you submit to a journal. It almost never happens, unless you're a genius, okay? So you will be rejected, then maybe accepted with certain revision, with major revisions to the article. Then again, you do the major revision, then rejected again. So that's why we should call rejected and rejected again. Because that's what happens when you try to submit. But I mean, you have to be perseverant, otherwise you'll not get any article published. Yes, last question.
I make a few comments from some of the things I've learned. So one of my mentors, what he does is, I mean, I learned it from him. Sometimes he just writes the editor directly with the abstract.
Yes.
And then sometimes the editor, if they are interested, will say, okay, this is what I have to submit. The other thing some people have talked about is there's also sometimes a benefit in sending the paper to a journal with a relatively high impact factor. Because by the time, if they eventually go on, some will reject the paper outright.
Yeah.
But if they send it to reviewers, then it's an opportunity for you, even if they don't accept it on the long run, to improve on the quality of the paper.
Exactly, yes, but this is not exactly the objective of this workshop. But yeah, don't forget that there are many steps when you submit an article, what happens after this whole other story. But in fact, there's an editor, then the editor decides, he's the judge actually, he can automatically reject your article. For example, if you try to really go higher, to submit to a very high quality journal, very high quality journals are very likely to reject articles. The editor will immediately send you an email telling you, okay, we regret to inform you that despite the quality of your article, we regret to inform you that you are receiving a lot of articles right now. Okay, they will reject it, okay? They will not even send it to reviewers. However, when the editors might say, it's an okay, it might be accepted, we will see, then they will send them to reviewers. Reviewers are like consultants, so they don't have any power, but they give their opinion. And in most of the cases, the editor follows the opinion of those reviewers. And generally, they send to 3-4 reviewers, generally 2 or 3 responses. They need at least 2 reviews, sometimes 3, but they send to more. I mean, they send to 5, 4, 2 or 3 would answer. If only one answers, they keep sending. Anyway, so if you have 2 or 3 reviews, then in fact, even if they